It's no secret that the most violent combat sport in the world can often cause some pretty gruesome injuries that can change the course of many fighters' lives. The UFC has seen some of the most cringe-inducing leg breaks, lip splits, and hematomas ever in MMA. Some of these injuries are usually just a product of a hard fight and don't result in any lasting damage, but then there are injuries that take their toll and force fighters to prematurely end their livelihoods. And we at Sportskeeda MMA are going to explore some of what we think are the worst career-ending injuries. Number 5. Claudia Gadelha. Claudia Gadelha was once a promising strawweight title contender in a time where the division saw a murderer's row of competition. After starting her career a perfect 12-0, Gadelha fought former champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk in a bloody strawweight title eliminator at UFC on Fox 13, where most media outlets scored in favor of Gadelha. If she was not victim to controversial judging, could she have gone on to see UFC gold? She had taken a second shot at Joanna, but the champ was too much for Gadelha. Despite never finding a consistent rhythm after that fight, Gadelha was still a top 10 contender, but suddenly in 2021, she announced her retirement, and for a reason that has plagued the sports for a long time. Gadelha was diagnosed with a terrible concussion shortly after a punishing fight with Yan Xiaonan at UFC Vegas 13. She would describe headaches that felt like a knife stabbing her skull, as well as constant dizziness and nausea. Wanting to put her mental and physical health first, she would decide to retire, but is now working in Brazilian fighter development for the UFC. Fortunately, Gadelha did not fall victim to fighting way past her prime, like many other fighters have done in their careers. Number 4. Nick Lentz. A veteran of 25 UFC fights, Nick Lentz impressively started his career in the UFC with a 16-3-1 record, but eventually became what some would call a journeyman. The Carney has some notable wins that span 3 weight classes and even faced some of the most destructive fighters the UFC has ever known, including going the horn with Islam Makhachev and a winless trilogy with lightweight champ Charles Oliveira. However, his career in life would change for the worst after returning to the featherweight division against Arnold Allen at UFC Fight Night 166. During the fight, Lentz sustained a grisly eye injury that reduced his vision by 40%. Lentz said that after the fight, "I couldn't even get out of the cage. I couldn't see the steps. I couldn't see anything. My vision didn't return to normal for 9 months after that until I had surgery." Impressively, Lentz demonstrated all-time toughness by taking a fight with undefeated Movsar Evloev for his last UFC fight, almost exactly a year after the injury. Lentz ultimately decided to retire right after his last fight, in a post that shows you just how brutal the fight game can get, and to think Michael Bisping lost an eye and still became champion. Number 3. Ben Askren. The story of Ben Askren reads like a fairy tale gone horribly wrong in an instant. 19-0, championships in Bellator and won, retiring from MMA but accepting an offer from Uncle Dana for a chance to capture a 3rd promotional title and surpass George St. Pierre as GOAT, only to be sent to the Shadow Realm in 5 seconds by Jorge Masvidal. Many fans attributed his fall from MMA grace to the devastating flying knee, but the end of his career was just an unfortunate side effect of his years of wrestling. Askren cited a long-standing hip injury as the primary reason for hanging up the gloves. The injury was so severe that Askren said he was completely done for competing unless there's advancement in technology. Askren would go on to get a hip replacement for his troubles as one of the most dominant grapplers of all time. Ben Askren did compete one final time in a superstar boxing match with Jake Paul, but fortunately, his hips weren't harmed in the knockout. Number 2. Ronaldo Souza. Jacare Souza was one of the most elite jiu-jitsu practitioners the UFC has ever seen. The former Strikeforce middleweight champion racked up an impressive 14 submissions during his MMA career, even tapping champions Robbie Lawler and Gegard Mousasi. Speaking of champions, Jacare was on the cusp of a UFC title in his prime, poised to be the #1 contender until he fought Yoel Romero and lost via split decision, despite 12 of 17 media outlets scoring the fight in favor of Jacare. There seems to be a trend here, with bad judging leading to a fighter's career decline, but Jacare got himself right back into the title fight picture after 2 finishes, and then Bobby Knuckles happened. Since that fight, Jacare would only go 2-5 and end his career on a 4-fight losing streak, but this was not the reason he retired. In his very last fight in the UFC, up-and-coming grappler Andre Muniz broke his arm in one of the most brutal fashions. The snapping was so loud, Daniel Cormier had to take off his headset, and Joe Rogan reacted in horror. The legendary Jacare Souza had never been submitted in MMA up until that point. The horrific injury and his age ultimately contributed to his MMA retirement. Number 1. Bas Rutten. 33 fights in 6 years. Out of 28 wins, 25 of them finishes. First Dutch UFC champion, UFC Hall of Famer. These are just a couple of accolades in the dominant career of one of MMA's most lethal pioneers, Bas Rutten. Rutten fought during the Wild West days of MMA, where bouts were just one round and could easily range from 15 to 30 minutes long. These long and grueling matches came with the inevitable injuries, just like when he fought Kevin Randleman for 21 minutes at UFC 20 to controversially win the heavyweight title. During this fight, Rutten's nose broke so badly he had to make himself throw up blood because he was swallowing it. Rutten would sustain other minor injuries here and there, but over time, his frequency in grappling training led him to have knees with no cartilage. And it certainly didn't help that Rutten routinely trained like an animal. But his career killer was a serious neck injury he sustained in training for the next UFC fight in 1999 that caused atrophy in his arm due to nerve damage, leading his arm to be almost completely useless, as seen here on the Joe Rogan Experience. This injury, along with a torn bicep and blown out knee, prevented him from continuing his MMA career after capturing UFC gold. At 41 years old, Rutten did fight once more in 2006, 7 years after his title fight, but decided that the long-term effects of his neck injury took too much of a toll. Sometimes, it's the toughest fighters that get hurt the most. You know what doesn't cause career-ending injuries? Subscribing to Sportskeeda MMA and following us on all of our social media platforms. Thanks for watching.